Hello, welcome to today's HR Huddle. Happy President's Day. Many of you might have today off. We are working, however, so we are going to continue our HR Huddle today. And with me is Renee Moelders. Thanks for joining me today, Renee.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here, Tamera.
So we thought we would talk about this period of proactivity that we think many HR groups, HR professionals have right now as our CPAs and accountants and consultants are probably mired or getting mired in busy season, whether that's, tax season or just different consulting projects they might have going on. This is often a time to focus on some of your initiatives that you might have. And I was sharing with Renee that Jen and I talked with you guys about picking your three things, like, what are the values for your team? And as you look at 2023, how do you want to operate? And then what are your three boulders, if you will, that you want to progress and forward in 2023? And we hope you did that, or they're at least formulating. They might not be completely done. I know our strategic planning meeting is in March, so we're formulating and finalizing ours as well. But we thought if you took those and then say, what are we going to progress here in the next 90 days? During this little bit more proactive period, map that out for yourself, map that out for your team, make sure they're clear about it. It can be very overwhelming for some people, like it's a lot to get done. For others, it's like, I have a lot of time. I have the rest of the year to get done. And so we have, different personalities on our team, and you might fit in one of those. And so just to say, what are we going to, get done and march along here, progress here, but also to manage expectations. One of the things I know, Renee, when we coach people, we talk about one of the reasons to set milestones and set goals is to manage expectations. So you can manage expectations externally from the HR function to your partner team, to the leadership team, or to others that are appropriate. So they know what your focus and your priorities are, as you're working on things. So that's a place to get started on this idea of proactivity. What would you add to that, Renee?
Well, Tamara, I'm thinking about a couple of things. First of all, the HR Huddle, Caroline might have put it in the chat down there, but that was January 9th. If people want to go back and listen again to Tamara and Jen's discussion about top three priorities for HR. And so then, next step, the next place my head went, Tamara, was project planning, which with our TLP coaches, they are in all different places around that. And a lot of them get hung up on, I have to have it all figured out before I can get started. And so I would encourage you, if that's you, to get a little team of people. Maybe it is people that work in the HR function with you, or some administrators that do, or if you can grab some time from a couple of other people in the firm who can just form a little working group with you and brainstorm and kind of get some ideas on the table. I guess don't do it alone, and don't feel like you have to plan the whole thing out,
right?
But just map out the next few steps of what am I going to go and pull data on, or research, or look into, or start building a plan. So don't do it alone, and get started. Get started on some steps that you're going to take in the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months.
Yeah. And you'll be amazed. That's such a good point, Renee. And you'll be amazed what you get done and what you progress. And then you can build on that in those stepping stones. I do think that's one of the things that has us not get started, is we feel like we have to have it all mapped out. And instead, what are we going to get done in 90 days? And huddle your team together and, have them do the same thing for their stuff, whatever whatever it is that they own. And then you can also figure out different resources or whatever that might be. So I think that's really important. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and ideally, you'd have some SWOT data. You'd have like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, because some people might be stuck on picking their top three. Yes. And not really sure, where do I start? And so if you have some SWOT data, then you can dial in on, maybe there's a weakness that you want to improve over the next year, or an opportunity you want to take advantage of. And then, Tamara, we've been our team has been starting to read Josh Burson's HR predictions, which I have printed out here. It's a pretty extensive report, but he goes through and he makes these 13, I believe, predictions about HR. And so that's another place that people can go if they're not really sure where to start. Look at what are the trends, and then compare, like, where are we with that? And one of the things he really dials in on, Tamara, is recruiting. He says recruiting they are going to be the stars in 2023. They're going to be just so important and elevated inside of organizations. And firms really need to think strategically about what kind of person they put in that role and how much emphasis they place on it. And so those of you who don't have a recruiting engine and don't have a human being who's responsible for that, that might be something that you come out of busy season saying is, look, we've got to get a point person for recruiting. And this is what I recommend. And, having the reasons why. It's not just that you go to your partner group and say, I want to hire, but you really explain this is why it's going to be important to us and make your case.
Yeah. Well, and we've been talking about continuous recruiting and that, we need a person paying attention to it that owns it at least part-time. But if you're approaching 100 people, you need to be having somebody that's recruiting all the time. And we've been seeing that, in the HR functions that we've been coaching and helping develop and expand out, that is one of the key places. That and learning and development, I think, are probably the two big areas that we have been seeing firms want to expand out. And how do we get dedicated resources to them and what's possible and paint that picture when we do that with partner groups? Because they look at it like, well, our tax department does that, or our consulting department does, those things, both on the recruiting and L&D side, by the way. But then when we talk about having somebody that orchestrates it and coordinates it and, trains on it and, tracks it, they're like, oh my gosh, that would be so nice to have somebody else do the thinking and planning for it. You still need the technical expertise to qualify candidates. You still need the technical expertise, to either validate external training or create internal training. But that orchestration is huge. And we just don't have the capacity. And so if we can take that out of their hands, what does that free them up to be able to do with clients and, expanding more with clients or business development or team relationships or whatever it might be. So I think that's a great place. And that's a good resource to go look and see what he's recommending. There's other resources out there too, to say, what else should we be paying attention to that's coming up? And before we go there, I know we want to go there, Renee, I want to add another tool, since we're talking about tools for figuring out what my top 3 things are within my department. If I'm doing L&D or I'm doing recruiting or whatever it might be, the SWOT idea for sure. Another one is keep, stop, start. What do I want to keep doing in this area? What do I want to stop doing? And maybe it's because it's not needed or somebody else is doing it. But then what do I want to start doing? And I have to have some stops in order to do some starts, most likely. Or we need to have leverage and resource if we're not going to have stops and we're going to add, which is, to your point, then I probably need a recruiter as an example. But that's another, just use some of those really simple back of the napkin tools like a SWOT or a keep, stop, start to help you identify what are the top things you want to pick to go focus on. And it can't be that many, which we've said before. And so identify those. And then to your point about resources, I think that's one of the other things during this proactive time is really going out there and finding out what resources and what people are saying and learning for yourself, learning for your group about, what's going on in talent management, what's going on in recruiting, what's going on in L&D. How is technology being leveraged? And Josh Person is a great resource, especially at the trends level and high level. We love following him. And so he's succinct, although there's a lot. He's succinct. So he's a great resource. And then I think there's others, with CPA, FMA, the CPA for Management Association. They've got a lot of resources and groups and discussions to participate in. What else would you add, Renee, from a proactivity learning perspective?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up CPA, FMA, Tamera, because I'm just always amazed meeting people and they aren't members, or their firm is a member, but they don't have their own individual login to be able to get onto the website. And so first of all, find out if your firm has a membership, because it is a firm-wide thing. So if firm has a membership, everybody, all the HR people, all the administrators and operations people, everybody can get their own login. And then there's this awesome forum with the CPA FMA. So I get an email every day because I'm a member of that forum, and it shows me the conversation that people had the day before. it's a summary thing. And, I just sort of skim it. But every once in a while, there's kind of a scintillating, really interesting conversation, which you can click on, and then you can read all the tags to it. And sometimes it continues on day by day. You can get in there and be a part of that conversation. You could put out there, by the way, because sometimes the conversation can be pretty in the weeds. It's like, what's your renewal for health benefits? What's your percentage? It's like little tactical things, Tamara, but you could start a conversation to say, what are your top 3 priorities? And see if people will chime in and start a conversation about what are they going to be working on this year. And, play around there. So CPA FMA is an awesome resource.
Yes.
And then I think SHRM, I know a lot of people are members of SHRM. That is an additional membership. So that's the Society of HR Human Resources Management. They probably have their own forum. I don't participate in that on a regular basis. Now, that's not accounting firm specific, but still, Josh Person's not accounting firm specific.
Right.
And I was like, 11 of the 13 suggestions for this year, I was like, wow, my clients could use this. Mm-hmm. So, SHRM would probably be a good place to go. I also love Accounting Today, Tamara. Mm-hmm. And so you can get a print subscription, which I like. I like to read it that way, but I know a lot of people subscribe to the email and they have that just coming into their inbox, either daily or weekly. You can probably choose. And some of that is accounting specific and you won't read it. It's like how to interpret the standards or something. And I just skip those types of articles. But some of it's really important, like business model stuff or things that people are worrying about. And then, one of my favorite parts of the Accounting Today is Dan Hood's editorial at the very front of the magazine, where he's like musing on our profession and things that are changing or things that should change. And HR people should be reading that. And they should sort of be expanding outside of not just human resources, but like what's happening in the business. It's a common complaint about human resources that they don't really understand the business that we're in. And so don't let that be about you. Be sure you are really seeking to understand and even to lead then your leadership team into, hey, look, we need to do these things because of the impact to the business.
I love that. And I think that's another place to look is if you belong to an association, participating in their conferences. And not just like, I know we participate a lot in the BDO Alliance, and there's other, associations that have similar roundtables, but they have a talent roundtable, they have an L&D roundtable, they have a business development roundtable and a marketing roundtable, and those are separate, by the way. And so for sure, participate in those. But to your point, Renee, attend the conferences, attend the events, learn about the business that we're serving in, and go network with those people, go learn about them, in addition to how can I further your area of expertise around HR and talent. But those are really super resources. I would also add Going Concern as another place that you should be reading. And they're a little snarky, and but they're saying it the way they're viewing it or hearing it, or that the next gen is talking about what's happening in the profession and around talent and people and firms and change they would like to see. So I would go see what is being said, from that perspective, go read about it, and just, kind of have a pulse, on that group as well. That's another good one to pay attention to.
Totally. So those are, professional growth resources, Tamara, but we also talked about, we didn't talk about your team. I mean, making sure that your recruiter, if you have one, or your HR administrator, if you have one, is also plugged into the CPA FMA forum, or is also subscribing to webinars, or is going to go to some sort of learning program this year, which, by the way, is not that expensive. You find some generalized HR education that's happening, getting those people plugged into some sort of networking, or having them just expand their horizons, because don't grow all by yourself and then kind of feel sorry because you have to do all of that thinking. Have those people come up and grow alongside you and really start pushing on you to say, hey, I went to this seminar, I have some ideas. I think most people would be like, hallelujah, I'm so glad you showed up with those. So being sure you're also planning for their growth during this downtime and then into this year, so that they can serve you and the firm better. But Tamara, we also talked about, in addition to growth, we talked about energizing ourselves. Yes. I think you used a word, something like nourishing ourselves, because, we're going to get sort of right after April 15th, things get crazy for most HR people. You shift into high gear, you have benefits renewals, you have, getting going with recruiting, perhaps campus planning, you have just all kinds of things.
Performance reviews and evaluations are usually that time of year, or CPE goes through the roof. I mean, all of it.
That's right. Yeah. So, in addition to planning about how we're going to be learning or thinking about that, how are you taking care of yourself and the team and getting ourselves recharged for that? And, maybe some fun activities, maybe some things that you do together to do some planning but to also enjoy each other. I've been seeing, actually, it's interesting, Tamara, a couple of HR people who have remote folks, they have made it a point to get on a plane and go out and visit with that person. And maybe that coincided with being out in that part of the country, but just using this time to connect. Yes. So I wonder if you have some thoughts on that, the whole re-energizing idea.
Well, I think it's both personal and individual, but then it's also for the team, like you said. So let's look at personal first. And so, what are you doing to re-energize, making sure you're having time off? You're setting the tone for that, by the way, as a leader, as the HR leader, is making sure your people have time off. And then also, how do you get fed? And that's different for all of us, right? For some of us, it could be, downtime. For some of us, it could be physical activity. For some of us, it could be, scheduling my own personal retreat to pamper myself and do some thinking and planning for the year. Maybe it's family time, whatever that might be. But it's some combination for you personally. What does that look like? And make sure your people are doing that too, and that they're planning some time off. And not just during this 90 days, but this is a good time to do it. Also looking at the year, we've been scheduling our time off, for the year, right now. But then, Renee, to your point about the team, how do we re-energize our team and, just gel as a team, rekindle as a team, and finding some ways to do that. And it could be through fun events. If we're remote or we've got multiple offices, it could be things that we do remotely. Maybe we bring the team together for a day and a meal, an evening meal or some kind of fun in person, if that's feasible. But there's lots of ways we could plan some time to come together and, maybe we have a speaker, maybe we do some learning together. Maybe we do a remote escape room together. So just figuring out some kind of combination of that. Maybe you talk about your top 3 things and what kind of support you need, or, there's just lots of things that we do. Strengths finders, personality assessments are a fun team event. Strengths finders is a great one. You could take the assessment. It's online. Everybody gets the book and do that online and, do the strengths finders and talk about the different strengths you have and how they play to the team and knowing that about each other so we can tap into it each other. So that's a combination of fun and learning, both about yourself and about your team. But I don't think we do that enough in our own group or our own departments. And that's a place to invest in and re-energize.
Yes. And that is such a great idea, Tamara, with Strengths Finders. It's so inexpensive. I think it's like $20 per person to buy the book, and you get the little code in the back. Yep. And then you can put together a grid that kind of maps out where is everybody. And it's interesting to see, where are we similar and where are we different? And maybe where do we have holes as a team that we would like to shore up? With our next hire, we might want to think about looking for some skills in that particular area. It's also a wonderful investment in those people and in yourself, and to say that to them, you matter. And so I want us to get together and learn about one another and how we can leverage one another better. Yes. So I love that idea. And then having fun. I do think that's just, we don't always stop and take time for that. And Tamara, one other thought. So you and I were at a conference a couple of weeks ago. We have a consultants group that we participate in, and that was a 3-day conference. half days. And I've been thinking next year when we do that conference, I want to block off that whole week and have it really just be about, if I'm not spending time with people at the conference, that I'm spending time with myself planning for the year, using that time wisely. I was kicking myself that I scheduled client calls and that I scheduled team calls and that I didn't really purposefully think about how I wanted to use that time, because you're in this mindset of like expanded thinking. And I could have really applied that to our business and myself.
Yes.
So those of you going out to conferences, please don't also put in appointments and all those things. Really give yourself the space to enjoy that conference, take in the ideas and expand your thinking.
Well, and it is an investment. Renee, you use that word. Think of it as an investment in yourself, in your firm, in your team. When we do that, and we often think like, I got to be doing all this other stuff. It feels frivolous or something, and it is not. It is an investment. And so I think that's a really good word, from a mindset, to think about those kinds of events and, proactivity, dreaming, learning, expanding, all of those things, both personally and again for your team and your firm as well. So, well, hopefully this gave you guys some ideas, for hopefully what is a time of proactivity for you, or some good proactivity for you and your team. And if you want to expand on any others or talk to us about any of these ideas, you can let us know. And, we've got other resources and things too. We're also connectors. So that's the other thing to think about is, who are you connected to? Who are you connecting your people to, like your recruiters? We'll connect new HR, directors and new recruiters to other people in the profession, but get plugged into those associations. That's a great way to make connections. But we're also connectors. So we'd be happy to do that as well. And I know Caroline put some the other HR Huddle in the link there, so you can take a listen to that, and then we will be with you next week. We hope you have a great week. Happy President's Day again, and be safe out there. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.